he's got all day to do it, and 5... Oh, she was going around the bend doing 5 miles an hour.
Damn, she's a slow train.
Welcome to Baggage Claim, an unofficial Jet Lag the Game companion podcast. Today, we're unpacking episode 5 of season 14, SnaKe South Korea. I'm Casey.
I'm Kira.
And I'm Jaya.
Kira, based on the challenges we see in this episode, would you survive Squid Game?
I think the short answer is not a chance. Absolutely not. I do feel like watching these challenges, I don't think I would be horrendous at them. I feel like in my head of heads, I feel like I would be okay at them.
In your head of heads?
In my head of heads. I feel like I would be okay at them, but you can't just be okay. You have to, not lose. And I do think that I would eventually fail all of them at the time when it matters.
Jaya, what about you?
Oh god, I would die instantly. I feel like I would be the second person to die in Squid Game. Not quite the first, but the second. So I'm not the most memorable, but everybody's like, damn, that sucks to be you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that based on the fact that I couldn't even watch the show because it gave me such extreme anxiety, I would be out for the count immediately. But before we jump into the recap, something very exciting has happened after this last episode, which is that Jaya has gotten bingo!
Yeah! Woohoo!
Jaya, do you want to read your winning bingo line?
I would love nothing more. So we have Adam has a costume change. And then we have Ben mentions Korean media, for of course Squid Game in this one. We have the center tile, we're so back. We have Korean street food from the Manju snack zone. And then we have bromance from both unionizing against Adam and Ben hyping Adam up in the park when they were playing pinecone baseball.
All right, let's jump into the recap. Ben and Sam start in a rough position. Adam is about to arrive at Yongsan Station, but there are no departures out for an hour, and the blockers ideally want to go on the low-speed line to draw new cards at new nodes, which leads them to curse the high-speed line, hoping that it delays Adam enough to allow the blockers time to beat him to Osong. Luckily, Adam takes his time with the Buldak taste test roadblock, which he ultimately clears. In the meantime, the South Korean Supreme Court upholds the president's impeachment to much applause at the train station. Ben and Sam finally get a train out of Yongsan, drawing another curse and a valuable battle challenge. Adam overcomes the psychological trauma of hide-and-seek New York to fulfill the curse of the bug friend, bringing his new ant friend Jimmy along with him. In Chun and Asan, the blockers lay down their battle challenge with only a few minutes before Adam and Jimmy arrive. Ben immediately threatens bug murder before they engage in high-stakes marbles with Deok-su's game. With some stressful slow-mo and Sam's not-so-helpful guidance, Adam wins at the very last moment, proving himself to be the clear challenge champion. The blockers decide to follow Adam onto his next train, cursing the line with the curse of the K-pop stan. Despite their best attempts at distracting Adam, he succeeds at identifying a K-pop group, and the three continue on to Osong. Because the blockers and the SnaKe are on the same train, the battle challenge in Dongdaegu isn't in effect, so Sam manages to pull a sneaky transit strat and move down the train, where the train splits into 2 with different destinations. Still, the blockers' shenanigans haven't ended Adam's run, and after jumping massively into the lead, Adam's running up against the time limit. Sam fails at Ganji, which means Adam has no roadblocks in front of him. He decides to optimize for reaching a node and tallying up his final distance, and becomes the first SnaKer to crash into his own path. Epic fail. Adam ends his run at a commanding 867.3 kilometers, or 538.9 miles. To conclude our recap, I've come up with a title to highlight the most important moment of the episode. I feel like in this episode, we really saw Adam's hand-eye coordination prove to be the secret to his success. So my title is a bit of a D&D reference. High stress, high dex.
Ooh, I like that.
I really like that.
That feels extremely true for Adam.
That's Adam.
Do we have any alternate titles?
I was also thinking kind of a simple one, just For All the Marbles, because it's a play on the battle challenge, and also it feels like this run might have a huge impact on just the rest of the game more broadly, and so it feels like it's For All the Marbles.
For All the Marbles is fun.
With that, I will hand things off to Jaya for the Strat Chat.
Thanks, Casey. Welcome back to the Strat Chat, our segment where we break down the strategy and gameplay of the episode. I feel like in this episode, a lot of the strategy that we saw was actually laid out in the previous episode, so there wasn't a ton to talk about, but I had 2 things I wanted to pose to you. We'll do it in chronological order. So first, we see Adam and Yongsun doing the Buldak challenge while the blockers are also in Yongsun. Adam doesn't realize that he could gain a massive advantage by doing this challenge really quickly, so he wants to take his sweet time with it. He wants to do it as well as possible. And so I wanted to ask you guys about doing a challenge quickly, but you might be more likely to fail, versus taking your time with it. In which situations is which one more advantageous, and do you think there's any way to suss out which situation you're in with just the snaker's knowledge?
I think that this is a really good question because of how different this season is than other seasons and their challenges. So even just in comparison with the last season, Schengen Showdown, I think that there was a real debate about, do you take the time to make sure you could achieve a challenge versus trying to knock it out before the next train departure. And with Schengen Showdown, if you already had claimed the country, then maybe there was less of an immediate need to spend your time and make sure that you lock that country. Versus stealing a country, you obviously want to make sure that you really accomplish that challenge to be able to do the thing that you want to do, which is to steal. And then I am also reminded of the Australia season where the challenges, there was kind of a direct correlation with the game mechanic of you would invest and then get, money back times 2, times 1.5. You would get a certain amount of additional money, or you would lose your investment. And so I think that there was a significant incentive to really spend your time, devote your time to be able to accomplish the challenge, because if you failed, you were losing money. Versus something like tag, where if you're doing a challenge and you can't succeed at it, then that vetoes. Sure, you're not able to move. That is dangerous. But it's not like you're necessarily losing coins and you're not able to get on a train. So here, I think that it's kind of different, because if you fail a challenge, that's it. Your run is over. So I do think that there is an incentive to spend as much time as you need to succeed at the challenge, because if you fail, that's it. However, the more time you take on it, the more time the blockers have to predict your next move, get ahead of you. But I still think that that is not enough to dissuade taking time. Sure, the more time the blockers have, the easier it will be for them to set up other roadblocks or challenges ahead of you. But still, the alternative is ending your run. So I really don't think that there is a ton of incentive to rush through a challenge here in really any situation.
Yeah, and if the blockers get ahead of you, they're not gonna be able to stop you at that node that you spent doing a challenge. They're gonna stop you at the next one, so you will still get some mileage.
Yeah, I completely agree with what both of you have been saying. And I'm also thinking about how, yes, in theory, spending more time in one place gives the blockers more time to predict your moves, but in reality, they're not predicting multiple moves ahead. That gets really complicated. And also the act of putting down a curse or a roadblock, that changes the snaker's strategy. And so in practice, what we've sort of seen is that if the snaker slows down, so do the blockers. And so in this episode, it was a little bit different, where having Adam take more time did mean that Ben and Sam could get ahead by a significant amount. But I feel like in the average situation, if the snaker is taking a lot of time in one spot, and you're assuming that the blockers are already ahead, there's minimal reward for the blockers to be going around to lots of places. Probably the blockers are going to stay in their optimal spot until they get more information from the snaker. Or, that might be a situation where they could put down a secret block and then keep moving. But we haven't really seen that happen. And so based on what we've seen of the gameplay, it does feel like it's always more advantageous to take your time with the challenge, because that way you're guaranteeing that you'll continue your run, and the minimal amount of time that you're gifting to the blockers in most situations isn't really going to benefit them all that much.
Casey, your note about the incentive for the snaker to spend a ton of time on a challenge is that the consequences for failing it are really, really high. But in this season, the thing that's unique is that the blockers also have to do the challenge. Mm-hmm. And so I think thinking about that, I am finding it really interesting to see how the blockers versus the snaker do challenges differently. Yes. Where if the blockers fail the challenge, they remain blockers, they still get to keep going, they just don't get to place that challenge.
Yes.
Versus the snaker really wants to take their time with it. And so I think we really saw that difference with the Buldak challenge, because Sam and Ben took so much less time to do it than Adam, but that's because their stakes were way lower.
Yes.
That's a great point.
The other question I wanted to ask you guys gets back to our discussion from a few episodes ago of how necessary the high-speed line is for a winning run and when to use it. Now that we've seen one run that used the high-speed line at the beginning, Sam's run, and one that used it at the end, Adam's run, what do you think is better? I'm seeing a couple of pros and cons to each. Where high speed early, I think the biggest pro for me would be getting a lot of distance between the snaker and the blockers at the beginning of the game, and then the snaker is kind of free to do whatever. The con is that then later in the game, because the high speed line kind of cuts the country in half, later in the game, it's pretty easy for the blockers to suss out where you're going, and it might be harder to string together routes without the potential of crashing. Versus taking the high speed late in your run, the pros, I think I already mentioned, is that you can save the high-speed line for later in the run when you have fewer options and want a quick getaway, and for higher unpredictability in the early game. And then, if the blockers use the high-speed line early, then they can't get cards while getting you on the high-speed line later in the game. But the cons are that if the blockers get good cards early in the game, the high-speed line is going to get blocked up to all hell, and you might not be able to actually get through it late in the game. What do you guys think about these different pros and cons, and what would you rather do if you were playing this game? Would you want to do the high speed early or late?
This is a really good question, and I am feeling quite conflicted about it. I think my general approach with SnaKe so far has been that it's more important to do well in the moment rather than always planning for the future in a really big way. Mostly because so much can change. So I feel like it makes more sense to try to do the most optimal thing early. So if it is the most optimal move to take the high speed early, I think that the snaker should take the high speed early, because that way you're guaranteeing yourself miles, and if you can only really plan one step at a time, you want to always do the thing that's going to get you the most miles in that moment. Whereas if you're planning on saying, oh, well, I could take the high speed or I could take the low speed and save the high speed for later, then what if you take the low speed and then later on in the run, the blockers are able to predict that you're going to want to get on the high speed and then they'll block it, and then all of a sudden it's no longer an option. And so I feel like the main reason why Adam's run was really successful was because the high speed line didn't really get caught up with blocks. And also, he didn't really have an option to get on the high-speed line in the beginning. So I think that if it had been more appealing to go on the high-speed line, if there hadn't been that battle challenge, I think he absolutely would have taken the high-speed early. But because he was forced off of the high-speed line, we're able to see the benefit of the high-speed line being later in the game. But I think that, like, if he had been stopped in Youngson and if he had lost earlier on, then trying to save optimal moves for later in the game just means that you might never be able to make that optimal move.
I completely agree with both of your assessments. I do think, and maybe this is just my Team Sam denial, the same way that I was like, oh, the airport should have worked in Hide and Seek
The
Japan.
airport should have worked.
It
really should have.
literally should have. But here I'm like, oh, I think it was definitely the better option to take the high speed early, because then obviously Adam and Ben took a guess and then they were on the complete other side of the country.
Yeah.
However, I do think that this is dependent on the rail network and where the snaker is. I think that Adam, for example, he kind of could have gone either way. The high speed and the low speed lines were parallel. There wasn't a whole lot of variation. Versus I think Sam really used not only the high speed to his advantage, but also the fact that it took him so far away on the other side of the country to his advantage.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially considering all of their different starting points relative to the high-speed line. Well, this has been an interesting strategy discussion, and I can't wait to see how it changes as we have another snaker running again in the next episode. But with that, Kira, I'll pass it to you for challengers.
Thanks, Jaya. Welcome back to Challengers, where we explore alternate ideas for how to complete a certain challenge. So in this episode, we saw lots of little challenges, so I thought that we would do sort of a speed run of what your strategy would be for each one. First, we saw Adam complete the taste test Buldak challenge. So now we've seen both teams complete it, and I'm curious, given the flavor options of what we've seen were readily available around Yongsan Station, which flavors do you think you would choose to optimize your chances?
I think that definitely trying to go for the most different flavors instead of just relying on spice levels is a good idea. So, like, I would see the stew as probably being pretty different from a more cheese-based flavor, for example.
Yep.
I looked up the rosé flavor that Adam also purchased that he was thinking about.
I think it would have been a good one. It's a tomato cream.
I also think that it would have been a good one. And maybe that, a cheese or a carbonara, and the stew seemed like it would be pretty different.
Yeah, out of the 4 that Adam had, I think I would have wanted to do either the stew or the spicy one, and then the carbonara or the rosé. But out of the whole list, I feel like we could get some really, really different ones in here, like maybe Mala, the Szechuan peppercorn one. Nothing else is going to have Szechuan peppercorns. Easy to identify.
Yeah.
Basil cream, it's the only thing with basils and cream.
Yeah.
Easy. And then just like a basic spicy one.
Yeah, I think if there had been a larger selection, either in a bigger convenience store or just, if there had been more options, I do think that they could have found 3 that were more different. And I feel like Adam just didn't really know what rosé was, and if he had known what it consisted of, I also agree that I think that would have been a good one to have in the mix. The next challenge we saw was the Bug Friend Curse. And so we've talked a little bit during our coverage of Hide and Seek NYC about the best strategies for collecting bugs. But here in South Korea, how do you think you would look for a bug?
I mean, it was cherry blossom season. I feel like I would try to go to the cherry blossoms. There are always bugs around cherry blossoms.
That's actually so smart. Yeah, I was thinking, okay, I think I definitely agree with how Adam did it. Dig in the dirt, perfect way to find a bug. You're gonna find one there. But given that it's cherry blossom season, I think in any sort of warm weather to find bugs, you want to look for flowers. You want to look for flowers or grass. I don't know if he would feel confident about being able to catch a flying bug.
That's a good point.
So I think maybe an ant really was the way to go for this challenge, but I really would have loved to, like, pull out my bug net and catch a bee.
All right, the next challenge we saw was the pivotal battle challenge, Deok-su's game, which is the marbles getting tossed into a little pit in the ground. Do you both have a strategy for this? How do you think you would try to accomplish it?
I do. And again, I don't want to backseat drive here, but I think that something a little heavier, like even just a rock, would have been maybe better because
less bouncing.
I think that there was just so much bouncing that it was hard to land and keep the quote-unquote marble in the hole. So I feel like something a little heavier. But with all of that bouncing, I feel like I would really put my physics knowledge to the test, and I would use those angles to my advantage. Kind of like how I like to bowl with the little guardrails up so that I could really just like hit it off the sides and use the angles
Like,
to
let
get
me
a
hit
strike.
the optimal diagonal.
Yeah.
to knock
You
down
intentionally
everything.
do a zigzag bowling pattern.
Exactly.
I think I agree with you on doing something less bouncy. We saw the different, like, bounciness of the chestnuts on different parts of the ground, and so I think part of the ground was not bouncy at all, and part of it was really bouncy, and that made a lot of unpredictability for them. So I totally agree on using something heavier that's just, like, not really gonna bounce. This might have been the camera angle, but to me it looked like they were doing, like, it looked like they were playing this game on an incline, and, like, throwing their chestnuts down a hill a little bit. And that really threw me, because I was like, they're even more likely going to bounce out. And maybe it's just that they couldn't find a perfectly flat patch of dirt to dig a hole in, but man, I would have done so bad at that.
Okay, I'm gonna propose something crazy, and then both of you are gonna say that's crazy and a bad idea. But I'm gonna propose it anyway.
Excellent.
Do you think it could have worked if you rolled it? If you rolled
That's what
your
I was
fake
thinking.
marble?
I would want to roll them, but I would fear, depending on how round the quote-unquote marbles that you have are, they just might not roll.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I also think that I personally, Kira, would be incapable of rolling a chestnut on dirt. And so I can't propose it as a good alternative if I can't do it myself. But I was curious because there kept being moments where it was like almost going in the, like it was on the right trajectory, but it was either a little bit short or a little bit long. So I wasn't sure. Maybe it would have been better. Maybe it would have been horrendous. All right. The next challenge we saw was the Curse of the K-pop stan. If you were the snaker scrolling through all of these pictures, what would you look for to recognize and memorize the groups? And also, would you have any strategies for remembering the names of the groups?
I think exactly what Adam did is how I would go about it. I have never been great with just pure memorization.
I think that the number of members of each group was definitely a good strategy.
Yeah.
I feel like something that I was thinking about, because I'm also not very good at memorizing, is it seemed like the backgrounds were pretty different. If there was a distinctive word or color in the background, that could have helped distinguish between the groups with, for example, the same number of members. Remembering the names, though, I would cry.
Yeah.
That's the part that I think I would really struggle with, because I feel like I would be able to say, oh, this is the group that has 7 members. I'm thinking about what the picture looks like, and I don't, like, the names are the thing I think I would find hard. I do think he had a great strategy for memorization. He tends to be very good at locking in for memorization purposes, as we've seen before. All right, and the last challenge was Beat Level 1 of Gongji, which is the game that Sam attempted and failed in order to put down the last roadblock. This is where you have to toss a rock and pick up another rock and catch the rock that you're tossing. Do either of you have any strategies for how you would accomplish this task and or how you would best use your 5 minutes of practice?
I think that I would just be really good at this challenge. This is absolutely misplaced confidence, but I know in my heart I could do this.
I think he was losing a lot of time in his 5 minutes by needing to go fetch pebbles that bounced away. I would have wanted to, like, sit in a patch of dirt, something a little less bouncy than, like, rocks on concrete. And I might have done it with something a bit heavier, again, where I think I can predict where something is going to go if it's a bit heavier than the, like, little pebbles that he was doing it with. I think I would either be really good at this or really bad at this, but I have played Jax before, and I was extremely mid.
Well, with that, I will pass things over to Casey.
Thanks, Kira. Welcome to a new segment I'm calling Lagtually, based on my beloved Dropout TV trivia show, Actually. Adam absolutely slayed at the challenges in this episode, which I will say has been a pattern across the show. So here's how this segment works. I will read you an incorrect statement about a jet lag challenge from across the seasons, and it's up to you to find the mistake and correct it. Of course, your correction must be preceded with the phrase Lagtually. We take our games very seriously here. In Tag 2, Ben draws the Eat the National Dessert Challenge. Because he's in France, he goes in search of profiteroles, but ends up thwarted by a closed restaurant.
Ding.
Yes.
Lagtually. Was he not thwarted by a closed restaurant and instead thwarted by the bakery or restaurant that he went to just not having them?
That is, I would say, partially correct. He was ultimately thwarted by a closed restaurant because the restaurant did have them, but it didn't open until noon. So he checked another bakery, which also did not have them. But that is not what I was looking for.
Bring Lagtually. Was it not Tag 2?
That is the correct thing, but...
Was it Tag 1?
Yes, that is correct. All right, so Kira got that one. Next up, maybe Sam would be better at challenges if he were more willing to talk on the phone. In Arctic Escape, Michelle's calling skills come in handy when she's able to verify over the phone that Home Depot sells... Yes.
Lagtually, I think it was Walmart.
That is correct.
Oh, I was also going to say
And also, Home Depot selling guns would be crazy.
Toby's knowledge of Australian slang comes in handy when she and Sam complete Amy's Australian slang quiz in season 10. They correctly identify that a bloody ripper means something really great, a budgie smuggler is a bikini, shouting something means buying it for someone else, and they even manage to pick the right response to this slang-laden sentence. So, I'm an ambo, and a bit of a battler, and I almost chucked a sickie last night, but I didn't, and then it was completely chalkers.
Bring.
Kira.
I think that the budgie smuggler is not a bikini.
You gotta say Jill, actually.
Jill, actually, I don't think that a budgie smuggler is a bikini.
You have identified the wrong thing, but do you know what it is instead?
I'll take a guess. Actually, now I'm so nervous I didn't say it. I think a budgie smuggler was, I'll say, oh god, I actually have zero memory. I'll say that it's a shirt.
That is not correct. So, Jaya, if you remember what a budgie smuggler is, you could steal the point.
I don't remember what a budgie smuggler is, but I'm gonna make a guess. I'm gonna say a budgie smuggler is like a weird little bag.
That is also not correct. So, I will give the point to Kira. A budgie smuggler is a Speedo.
I wasn't gonna say it. I never would have guessed that.
That makes sense.
In Arctic Escape, both teams go for the valuable steal card by racing to complete the Do a Mile Drunk challenge. After trying to order 4 shots of gin, Adam ends up drinking half of a double between running quarter-mile increments in the airport, while Michelle suffers to keep her wine down in the Home Depot parking lot. Yes, Jaya.
Michelle was drinking seltzer, not... Lagtually, Michelle was drinking seltzer, not wine.
That is correct.
Because I remember thinking, wow, if I had to chug a White Claw while running a mile, I would simply perish.
Well, and I think she was really struggling with the bubbles there.
The bubbles made for some unpleasant noises.
What a nightmare.
Last one, and you know I had to do it too. Had to be evil.
God.
One of the most iconic challenges throughout the series was to sing the Okai-Hau Express in Okai-Hau Rail Tunnel. Ben and Adam really struggled with this challenge due to the bizarre, hard-to-memorize lyrics of the song, which includes the particularly tricky passage that goes as follows. The driver doesn't worry if he takes the journey slow, driving the Okai-Hau Express. He's got all day to do it in and 40 miles to go, driving the Okai-Hau Express. She was going round the bend, doing 10 miles an hour. The whistle began to shriek. Well, she caught that bull in the middle of the brisket, and the engine smelled of steak for a week.
Bring.
Kira?
Lagtually. The second time you said driving the Okai-Hau Express is a different verb.
That is incorrect.
I can like hear them yelling about different lines in the song.
I know.
Ding.
Yes.
Lagtually, there should be a third driving the Okai-Hau Express in the last few lines.
That is also incorrect.
Ding.
Yes.
Lagtually, the line, well, she caught that bull in the middle of the brisket, is not right, but I don't know what's wrong.
That is incorrect, but that was a line that they really struggled with in the show. They kept on messing up the prepositions.
The rhythm of it doesn't make sense.
Bring.
Yes.
The first line, the driver doesn't worry if he takes the journey slow. Lagtually. The first line, the driver doesn't worry if he takes the journey slow, is cut and paste from a different stanza.
That is incorrect.
No!
This was so evil, you guys.
Lagtually, he's got all day to do it and 40 miles to go is wrong.
You have identified where...
Does he have 20 miles to go?
No.
Does he have 30 miles to go?
Yes.
That does not. I'm taking no points for that.
My next guess was gonna be, what if he's doing 5 miles an hour?
He's got all day to do it and 5... Oh, she was going around the bend doing 5 miles an hour.
And I'm like, damn, she's a slow train.
I really was like, how mean should I be? I know that was a tricky one.
No, you get to be that mean because that felt completely, like, faithful to how the scene went. Here's my first guess to this was, what if you gave us all of the lyrics right and, like, the tunnel isn't actually called the Okai-Hau Rail Tunnel?
That would have been criminal.
That would have been so evil.
Or if the correct answer was actually Ben and Adam didn't actually really struggle, they just had a medium time struggling.
Exactly. Well, thanks for playing Lagtually with me. You both ended up with 2 points each, so pretty successful. I think that Lagtually might make a reappearance. I thought it was really fun to come up with. Now we can move into the final part of our episode, Bud Thorn. Jaya, let's start with you.
My rose is, maybe I should move a little bit farther away from my microphone. I'm so proud of Adam. I love when he does things so good, and he's so good at Jet Lag the game, and Sam and Ben do bad at it, and they draw bad cards. No, I don't, actually. I love all of them dearly, but I'm so excited about how well this run went, and I'm also very excited that it brought me a bingo. My thorn, it kind of bums me out that even with the maximum run length rule, someone still might not get a second run. But for the sake of Ben's redemption and Casey's bingo board, I hope only Ben gets another run. And my bud is that I am gonna go try and find stew-type spicy Buldak next time I go grocery shopping, because I've only ever tried the carbonara and basic ones so far, and I thought they were only okay, and the stew-type sounds kind of nice, so I'm excited.
I also want to try the stew-type. It sounds really good. Kira, what about you?
My rose is that I thought it was really fun to see some Korean media being mentioned in this episode. My thorn is that it was kind of tough to see Sam and Ben successfully pull off such a cool shenanigan with the train splitting, but then see that it didn't actually end up changing anything. I really wanted that to pay off.
Oh, me too.
And then my bud is I am filled with stress and excitement about how this next run is going to go. I'm so curious who it's going to be. And also, like, now that there is a specific distance to beat, I wonder whether we're going to start seeing the sneaker optimizing to get just enough to win, and how having this number in their head is going to impact the game.
Completely. My rose is that I really had fun with the shenanigans of all three players being on the same train, especially with Ben and Sam really annoying Adam as he was memorizing his K-pop groups. I feel like it's still rare to have prolonged interaction between all three players, so I think that this season has been really fun on that front. And then kind of a personal rose is I had my first in the wild home game interaction where in DC last weekend, I ran into some people playing the home game in DuPont Coffee Collective. If that's nice. You, I want to be your friend. I was too flustered to say, can I play with you guys? But I want to. My thorn is that Adam abandoned Jimmy. That was so sad to witness. But my bud is that I'm really excited for this final run, or hopefully they get 2 runs out of it, but if there is only 1 run left, I think it's going to be very thrilling. And with that, thank you for waiting at Baggage Claim. Let us know your thoughts on socials at baggageclaimpod or over email, which is in the episode description. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a comment or give us a follow. We'll see you next time at the Dewey Decimal Baggage Claim. Don't worry, it's super easy to find your bags. Actually, just ask a librarian. Goodbye.
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 I want to flex my bee catching skills.
You're gonna bring that on the train? You're gonna bring a live bee on the train?
Anything. I've put bees in tubes before.
What?
Jaya's bee research.
I
do remember this.
I did my summer RU in college at an experimental farm doing bumblebee foraging patterns research.
That's awesome.
I've got a lot of bees with nets. I think I could do it.